I'm going to pin you all, spotlight the panelists. I know how to do that, maybe. Oops. So far, I've spotlighted Jonathan.
Flattered.
Spotlight, there we go. You all maybe, I don't know if you all can do that yourselves or not. Erin, do you know how to do the spotlight? It's on there.
I don't, but I can figure it out.
I'm adding it. So, all right. Hi, everybody. See if I can welcome and thank you for joining us. Those of you who were able to participate in our oral presentations and posters earlier this week, I just wanted to thank you for continuing to join us this week on our virtual attempt at this education forum. The medical students really made me proud yesterday in their capstone projects. 170 plus poster project is really well done. Today, our focus is really on curriculum revision. So this panel is going to share some of their wisdom about previous experiences, both in the PT program and the PA program with their own curriculum revision process. Most of you know that we are undergoing an MD program curriculum revision right now, set to launch our new TREC in July of this year. And this evening, we have a session with our medical students, which is an open forum for them to come learn about the TREC curriculum, answer their questions about it, and avoid, as I've already been cautioned, any use of the term guinea pig during that discussion. So I wanted to start off by welcoming our panelists, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. I'll just call you out the way you are pinned on our board. So that starts with you, Jonathan Bowser, in the top of my screen.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Shanta. So I'm John Bowser. I'm the program director of the PA program, and that's me. I'll stop there.
All right, we'll dig in a little bit more. Daniel Malone, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Dan Malone. I've been a faculty member since 2011, September 2011, and that'll come out a little bit more in that with our curricular revision, I entered the curricular revision process as it was already started. So the train had left that station when I came to CU. And it was a real eye-opener because this was my first full-time faculty position. I had been an adjunct at different PT programs back in the Philadelphia area. And I don't know your perception of adjunct, but nothing's easier than being an adjunct. You come in, you do something, and then you run away. And so this was a real eye-opener to me, A, as an educator, and B, as a member of the faculty. So I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me, and I hope you enjoyed the session.
Great, thank you. Jackie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jackie Sivahop. I'm the Associate Program Director of the PA program. I joined the faculty, it's almost been 12 years now. And interestingly, I was both a student and a faculty member in the traditional curriculum before we transitioned to the Colorado curriculum. So kind of have that perspective on both ends. So good to see you today. Thanks so much for coming.
Great, thank you for being here. And Mary Jane, welcome.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane Rapport. I'm the student services coordinator in the physical therapy program, as well as have a few other associated roles. And I headed up the curriculum, the last major curriculum revision that we did, which, as Dan already alluded to, was quite a number of years ago, and have been pushing from the back seat for our next curriculum revision, and we can get into that later if people are interested. So Thanks for having me.
Great. And Dana, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Judd. I am faculty in the physical therapy program, and I've been on faculty since 2014. And so my entrance into the curriculum revision was plans made, but not quite implemented. And so my first foray on faculty was actually teaching in both curriculums and sort of juggling what that looked like in terms of creating new classes and also finishing out old classes in the curriculum as we transitioned. So, so as Dan said, the train had left the station, was almost arrived. So that was sort of my entry point into our curricular revision.
Great. Thanks all of you for being here. And I wanted to point out that everybody was smiling while they were introducing themselves. So for those of us who are in the midst of our MD curriculum reform, where there aren't as many smiles these days, in the stress moments that we're in, I just want to point out to everyone the smiles on the faces of these faculty leaders who are joining us today. I thought I would start by just asking one of you from each of the programs really to say what was the impetus for your change, and a little bit of kind of where you are, when was it, and what's the timeline look like there. Mary Jane, your mic's off. I'm going to start with you for the PT program revision.
Sure. Thanks, Shanta, for the question. So our curriculum revision process basically kicked off in 2010. So that was quite a number of years ago. And really 2011-12 was the major point in time where we arrived on what the curriculum would be, look like, et cetera. As Dana already mentioned in her comments, it was 2014 actually when we went to the full implementation, and we had a side-by-side curriculum for a couple years as we got through the old and into the new. Our impetus was a couple of primary things or key items that were going on. One was that we wanted to eliminate one semester for our program. So we wanted to shorten our program to 2 years, 2 3/4 years, as opposed to basically a 3-year program. There was some initiative nationally at that point for programs to really begin looking at their length and to consider how students might be able to get out into the workforce faster. And we thought that taking some initiative that would put us in the kind of a leadership role among PT programs, educationally and nationally. We also had some interest in the program and a strategic planning around implementing what has been known as the year-long internship, which is an optional or alternative pathway that some of our students take. I don't want to spend too much time on that because in the end of the day, and that day probably being now, a number of years later, that kind of is sort of going by the wayside. It has not proven to be as effective as we thought it would. In changing the curriculum, however, and in eliminating the one semester, we were intent on keeping the same number of credit hours. And a lot of that, no surprise to probably any of you, has to do with tuition, and that we needed to maintain the same level of tuition that we had previously. The other big driver for us was that we had reached a point in our educational delivery where there was great interest of the faculty to integrate more coursework than had ever happened before. So just quickly explaining this, instead of each of us teaching our own courses and just making all the decisions and kind of implementing the structure for that individually, we wanted to do a lot more co-teaching, working across courses, making sure that themes and topics and content reappeared multiple times throughout the curriculum. And so in order to do that, it required us not only just moving some courses around, but also reconsidering number of credits per course and how we wanted this entire continuum of learning to appear over the 2.5 or 2 3/4 years of the curriculum.
Thanks. Thank you, Jonathan. How about from your
Sure.
angle?
Yeah, so our whole process is a little different from PTs, a little different from MDs in that we, so in hindsight, I think there was a lot of masochism involved when we had this really idealistic view of what we were going to do and how beautiful it was going to be. And it was really, it proved to be really hard, but it all started with this fateful curriculum retreat that we had in 2013, which was 5 years before we launched the actual thing. And in that curriculum retreat, we really focused on our values, not our values, capital V, but our curricular values, the things that we thought were important, are the things that had to be true for us to really be, feel value in our curriculum and feel like we were doing what we should be doing in education. And so we established a set of curricular values that we use to this day as a lens to gaze at potential change and other things. We look through this lens to say, are we adherent to our values? So those helped us design the curriculum, and we still use them. And shameless plug, I have a poster tomorrow on our curricular values and the curricular values approach to creating a curriculum. So if you're not busy tomorrow, check it out. But we created this set of values, and then we made this, we sort of came to this point near the end of our 2-day retreat where we said, all right, we're committed to doing this. How big do we want to go? Do we want to, move furniture around and repaint, or do we just want to bulldoze the whole thing? And we made, again, the fateful and somewhat a masochistic decision to bulldoze it, and we felt the only way we could really do it the right way was to build it from the ground up. So we created a brand new curriculum where we were able to co-opt some of our, a lot of pieces of the old curriculum, but the structure was completely different. And we borrowed a lot of our ideas from the University of Calgary School of Medicine, who had designed a very similar kind of curriculum. They're a 3-year med school. We're a 3-year PA program with a 2-year didactic phase. And they had created this curriculum almost 30 years ago, a little over 30 years ago. And they had really had some success with it. So we built our curriculum around their model with our own, our own flavor put in there. And then we spent about 2 years after that meeting just going, what are we thinking? And then the next 3 years is when we really got down to work and said, all right, this is now, we have a framework and we're going to start building. And we spent a solid 3 years creating everything. And then in 2018, we launched our first year. So we had 2 simultaneous curriculums running, the first year and the second year. We named the curriculum, we called it the Colorado curriculum because on the advice from Margaret Schenkman in PT, actually, she said, whatever you do, don't call it the new curriculum. So we called it the Colorado curriculum, and then the Chapa curriculum was our old curriculum. And we really avoided using those terms. We were really careful about it. And then it took us those 2 years of rollout were really, that was kind of like the panic mode where we were just always on high alert. Then when both of the didactic years were rolled out and the other curriculum was essentially, the didactic part of the other curriculum was put to bed, then we could start to kind of feel like we're in this new curriculum now. And that's been the past year. And unfortunately, the pandemic has made it a little harder for a bunch of reasons for us to embrace that transition. So we struggle with transitions, and the transition from rollout panic mode to stable refinement mode, we have not navigated very well, emotionally or in other ways. And part of that, I think, is because we can't be together in the same physical space. We feed off each other a lot. So anyway, that's our story. There's a lot more detail that I could share with you at a later date if you're interested. So
yeah, great. Just so that everyone knows too, I am a good listener and a learner. And so we are calling our new curriculum the Trek, and our O-word curriculum the Legacy. trying to avoid those terms too. So I can learn from your lessons, which is what a lot of what today is about as well. I maybe will open up a little bit to the panelists, the rest of the panelists, in terms of the faculty experience. I think the dual curriculum teaching is obviously a challenge, but what were some of the unexpected challenges that faculty maybe faced in the reform process or in the implementation? Dan, go for it.
Yeah, so I think some of the things that were really cool from a faculty perspective was there was generally agreement. Folks were ready, willing, and able to make change. And it would have probably been a little different if there was more hesitancy and you know, people were just being naysayers about the process. But for the most part, at least coming in as a newer faculty member, I was impressed with the camaraderie and collaboration that was going on. So that was a big bonus. With the reduction in that semester time, if you will, one of the biggest challenges I felt in very simple terms is what are the needs to know versus the nice to knows, and really making some very difficult decisions because, you know, if certain content is mine, I of course think all of it is fabulous and needs to be known, and being able to look in the mirror and really challenge myself and you know, and this is, you know, I think where collaboration amongst your other faculty, and if you have a team approach to teaching whatever content, really trying to figure out what is nice to know. And to me, that was just that's a process we're still going through, or at least I feel I'm still going through. So really challenging ourselves with the need to know versus the nice to knows, and focusing on the needs and being willing to let go of the niceties is really, I think it was a big challenge.
Great, thanks. I think all of us experience this idea of holding on to the pieces of something that we like. And especially if you're doing a bulldozer type approach, that's really challenging and can be hard for people to let go of. Other comments about that? Jackie, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I think I think we definitely were all ready to make this change. The hard part was envisioning what that would look like. So having been taught in a traditional style and then teaching in a traditional style, and now learning that there's a different way to teach, and the amount of time to create active learning experiences and not be the sage on the stage, but be a guide on the side, and what that looked like and what that meant was somewhat of a big transition. Also too, we went to kind of like what PT mentioned, we went to co-teaching. And so we used to be just responsible for our courses. And I just taught my course, and then someone else taught anatomy and someone else taught, but now we co-teach and we're responsible for all the content. So we are orchestrating who's coming in, when our content experts are coming in, we're responsible for that whole block. And so having two block directors, we call ourselves, lead that was also a big change, because it's kind of, you know, herding all these groups together and making sure that it's integrated and making sure the learning objectives are jiving. And we went to now having, you know, weekly exams. And so having to write questions every week and making sure that content's ready. And at the same time, we went to ExamSoft. So learning ExamSoft and trying all of these different things. We really strive to decrease cognitive load on our students. And in the process, actually engaged in a lot of cognitive load on ourselves. But in the long run, now that we're kind of in this refinement period, the cognitive load for all of us, I think, has significantly decreased. It was just in those initial, definitely in the rollout, when we were running these courses and learning and trying to adapt to all the new strategies. The first 2 years were difficult. And with our curriculum, it's a spiral curriculum. So right now I'm in my block and it's 4 weeks, and I have a first year cohort and a second year cohort that are running simultaneously at the same time. So, you know, trying to keep that straight too, of who's coming in and where they're going. And I think that was a shift, but it's running really well now that we've been able to launch it, and now it's just refinement period.
You know, I would just add one quick thing to Jackie's point, that I can't overemphasize how difficult the transition is for some people to go from being, you know, you're mayor of your course and you make all the decisions, to a truly cooperative teaching experience. It sounds great, but we had several faculty who left. It just wasn't their cup of tea. And so it's hard to, one of the big problems with our previous curriculum was that autonomy. We had all these little separate islands of courses, very little integration, very little talking, cross-talking, but very satisfying for those individual people on their little islands. And that we broke that all up, and that was more difficult than I anticipated for some people.
Definitely takes more time to team build and to team teach. Dana, do you want to talk a little bit about what the team teaching experience is like? Or
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think that, you know, one of the benefit, although it's difficult and sort of a change in orientation to teaching, I think one of the benefits is you get a lot of good ideas from your co-faculty that that make your course better. And in addition, knowing what's going on in other people's courses help make your course better, so that either you're not repetitive, you're not skipping things, but that you know what's going on. I think the other thing that's been helpful in some of the working together and co-teaching is that there can be some uniformity across courses about how things are rolled out. So maybe your Canvas site looks the same, maybe your schedule for lab looks the same, your exams look similar. And so some of that decreases cognitive load for the students as well, because they have a little bit better knowledge of what to expect in terms of how things are rolled out. So that unification really helps them sort of organize some of their materials, assignments, deadlines, how to use Canvas, that sort of thing. So I think that those are some of the benefits of co-teaching for sure.
great. And those are definitely things that we're wanting to try to do, is really standardize approach, structure, and partly to decrease that cognitive load. What I worry about a little bit is the autonomy, the innovation, the fun part for teachers. How do we make sure that our teachers across our faculty feel their sense of identity and their sense of ability to innovate while also following the same structure as everybody else? Smart people don't like to be put in boxes, right? So how do we maintain that sense of innovation and autonomy while also being standardized?
That's a challenge that is very, very, very difficult for us. Like we deal with that almost daily right now, because we're really, again, it goes back to the previous model. There was a lot of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a conversation we should have at some point about. There's a lot of layers to that, but we wrestle with it all the time. People don't like the kinds of things that help students in terms of having standardized approaches and having predictable structure are the exact things that frustrate faculty who want to be creative. And so I have some ideas on how to help, but that's a very, very challenging thing.
And I'll just add to that a little bit more if I can, is that, yes, that is definitely a challenge. I think we all recognize that. Perhaps some of the ways that we've been able to address that are to continue to recognize the people who are course coordinators as identifying them as such. It's a lot of trusting your other faculty and letting them know that this is not about the fact that I don't trust what you teach or how you've made your decisions, but there is some need for us across the program to have some similarity, for lack of a better word, and you can still be creative within your own course or your delivery or some aspects of your teaching, but it also has to look this way for the betterment of the common good, so to speak. And that, it does sound a little cheesy kind of when I say it, but it's the reality of things. And it's, we like to kind of we all like to think that we can play in the sandbox together. And sometimes people aren't so good. They get in that sandbox and they're not doing what they should be doing with the toys in the sandbox. We've gotten better, I think, at calling each other out on that in a positive way in which to make change, rather than just kind of always hammering certain people or a person for their lack of being able to participate on the whole. Again, I think there's a lot of solutions and a lot of ways to talk about it, but it is something you have to face head on, or you just end up in a complete disarray, or you end up with one segment of your coursework or curricula that doesn't look or do anything like the rest of it, and that's a problem.
Students will pick that up right away.
Yeah,
for sure. Right. Jackie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, having been a student recently, I really appreciated having my professors have a really standardized approach. And so one of the things we got the feedback from our students when we decided on what we were going to standardize. But I also was able, because I was going through school at the same time, have the perspective of being a student trying to navigate multiple Canvas courses and just the absolute frustration of trying to find material and not knowing where to go. And so I think what we've been able to do is we've been able to standardize the things that we know will cause the extraneous cognitive load, but still, like Mary Jane was saying, allow us to have the autonomy in our core in how we teach it. So, do we do more breakout rooms, or is this just going to be more lecture based? Or I say breakout rooms now because it's Zoom, but like what we can do within that class time. But when it comes to things like how our Canvas page looks and our syllabi and our PowerPoint slides, they're all standardized to decrease that load. And I will just say, as a student, that was extremely helpful to me to be able to allow me to focus on what I needed to know rather than trying to find all of the outside ways to find that information.
Did the faculty feel having those standardized approaches also decrease, make it easier for them once they kind of get into that rhythm? Or are they still bucking against you wanting to do their very own things?
Well, there are people who don't want to do it, and they do go down sort of kicking and screaming a bit. Because they don't want to have to redo their whole, they don't want to have to redo things they've done or change the way that they've been doing it. Some people adapt to change better than others. And you can really tell in this process who can adapt to change easily and who does not like it. There is no question about that. So many people, most of the people did adapt, and a few took a little bit longer, but what happened for some of those people was someone else on the faculty who they were co-teaching with and who they kind of had a good relationship with more personally were able to give them a little bit more of a holding hand and really help them along. And that was kind of how we got the last few pieces put together.
So some faculty champions, buddies for that, the trailblazers to bring them along. I'm going to let the audience also ask us questions, but I wanted to ask you all to reflect on how you keep things fresh and going. I think there's a tendency to do just like we do for accreditation site visits, have a big deal and a visit, and then kind of sit back because everybody's tired. And I can sense the idea of curriculum revision being like, okay, we made it and now we need to sit. But in order to not have to do a big curriculum revision over and over again, you've got to keep the CQI kind of going. How do you do that, or what strategies have you employed to keep things fresh and changing over time since the reform?
So I guess we have a lot of different processes, if you will, and we have a curriculum committee that meets monthly, and I think that is one really good strategy. Was it isn't It is an open, there's definitely assigned people who are part of the committee, but it's an open dialogue. There is a curriculum committee chair, which is actually me at this point in time. But I really look at it as, you know, everyone is on equal footing and everyone can bring suggestions to the table. So that is one avenue to, you know, I guess maintain a, I don't know, a responsive agility or flexibility or whatever you want to call it, because, you know, obviously content changes, new things are developed, new things need to be included. There are things that, and on this committee, we have student representation as well. And they will often bring lots of ideas. Like, so to me, one of the great examples of that, now others were probably much more aware, but you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, that was not something that I was completely aware of. And to me, at least, our students really brought that forward and opened my eyes. And then it started this multiple avenue of conversation, which was really good. So again, I guess how do we keep it fresh? We're constantly open to ideas. We have a curriculum committee that's faculty representation, student representation, and that's just one way of remaining agile.
And I think the other forced agility has come in the pandemic because we've had to really go towards blended, hybrid, totally online teaching. But I think that sort of has propelled us forward into looking at different models of educational delivery, even after the pandemic. And so this year has really forced us to look inwardly at how we're delivering content, not just what we're delivering, and is really going to bring about some innovation. So even if our curriculum stays in the same structure, the schedule of courses, how content is delivered is I think going to evolve because of what we've been thrust into this year. And so that forced agility, I think, is actually going to have some hopefully positive outcomes on what education looks like in the future.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the dean would refer to this as that the punctuated equilibrium that happens with evolution, right? Is one of his favorite terms to talk about. I think the pandemic for medical education and for obviously for a number of other things is going to be one of those moments of punctuated equilibrium. Jonathan, you were going to say something about that.
No, I was just going to say one of the things that we have been able to do this past year is to look, to kind of remind ourselves of the things that we hoped we would, the benefits that we hoped would arise from this completely new philosophy, and to call those out when they happen. So as an example, we're finding that our second year students we're having a harder time challenging them than we did with our previous curriculum, because I think some of the things we're doing are actually working, and they're able to think a little bit more. Their clinical reasoning is a little more advanced, and we see that with we have a progression of cases we use. You know, we have our first year cases that in the spiral modality, where the expectations for those cases are here, and then in the second year those expectations are raised, but we weren't prepared for how bored the students might get if we didn't set that bar high enough. And that to us was a little bit of a panic. We had to get that together and you know, bring that up to level. It was also gratifying because we're all having these moments. We're saying, you know, we are accomplishing something here. I think our second years are better at this than they used to be. So I guess my point is try to really remind yourselves of why you did it. Have benchmarks that you're looking for all the time. You know, and it can, you know, these were very non-scientific. It was just sort of like, hey, there's a moment that happened, right?
Acknowledging them and celebrating them along the way. Great. One of the other questions I had was really whether or not, we talked a little bit about how this impacted faculty. How about the impact on students, either the legacy students, as we'll call them, or the incoming students, and also an impact potentially on recruitment, if you saw any changes in terms of your admissions process, either deliberately or accidentally?
So I can start with that, and then somewhat surprising for us, the students did not accept this lock, stock, and barrel. We expected that they would. There was a lot of resentment from the students who were already in the program about the fact that the new students were going to get something better. There was resentment from the students, the next group, that they weren't getting, the people in the new curriculum that weren't getting what they thought that the students got previously. It was a constant juggle of trying to, just reinforce and reassure everyone that it was really okay, that what we had previously was very good. What we have now is very good. No one is losing out here. The change happens over time, even in education, in healthcare, and just a lot of communicating that message over and over again, I think was really, really important. And I think that we just really didn't anticipate the level of that we were going to have to spend time and energy doing. And it didn't just stop. Like, as far as recruitment, I'll answer quickly. When we first presented in our first attempt at, we're going to be having a new curriculum, that was met with a lot of, I would say, not a great positivity in the recruitment, even though we thought it would, and we were surprised about that. They were like, well, what does that mean? That what you've been doing isn't good enough? Or what is it like? There was still kind of this lack of trust. Over time, it actually did help our recruitment after, like with as we refined our message and got better at what our message was, it did help with recruitment, but almost to an extent that where students came into the program looking for something that was not the reality of what it was. They were looking for this thing that was so new and exciting and innovative, and we had maybe overspoken about what it was that they would actually visibly see. They had never been PT students before, so what did they have to compare it to? Nothing. And so that made it actually a little bit more difficult.
And if you don't mind, I'd just like to add kind of a COVID correlate, if you will, when we did our curricular revision, and we used to have these informal town halls where pizza was probably the driver for the student, but they were a really good open forum, and there was definitely this angst with regards to what am I missing or what am I not getting. And I do think that is also reflective of what we're seeing now a little bit, in that we've moved from, content delivery that was really in person to now this blended model. And our students are absolutely wondering what they're missing, what's not happening that we used to get when we were in person. So I find that a very interesting correlate that we're repeating, history has repeated itself in a very unexpected way. And it's been really, really interesting observation from my point of view.
Yeah, the final piece to that is just not to overlook the demand of faculty to manage that in addition to teaching in the new curriculum. So sort of back to a previous question, the load on faculty is about managing these student expectations and helping to coach and counsel them. So that is an additional load for faculty too.
Great. Jackie?
I think we did the same like PT. We really strived hard to over communicate what this curriculum was going to look like and what the type of learner would be that would best fit this curriculum. So we did that in our info sessions, our website, admissions, just making sure that it was really clear on what this curriculum was going to look like and what it wasn't going to look like, so that the expectations were set. And I think for our students, one of the big things too was we incorporated this Learning to Learn series that Dr. Larson was nice enough to allow us to kind of modify and use some of those pieces, so that in the beginning, particularly with the Colorado curriculum, we started right off with, this is what this curriculum is going to look like. Here's expectations. This is what that strategy is going to be. interestingly, what we found, at least from my experience, was I don't feel like we saw as much of those that were in the traditional curriculum and the Colorado curriculum going, what's going on? We actually saw it with our first Colorado curriculum cohort and our second Colorado curriculum cohort, where we had really engaged our first cohort in a lot of feedback, and we were so intentionally involved with them, always in class. Faculty were always there. We were watching them constant and getting their feedback. And then we left them, because then the next cohort came on and we were really interested in how they felt, because it was the second one. And the first cohort was like, well, you guys just abandoned us in second year. What happened? Like, you're not asking us anymore about what's going on or what is our perspective or things along those lines. And so they actually felt more abandoned, because then we started focusing on the next group coming in. And so we had to kind of reassess and go back in the classroom with them in their second year and start to kind of smooth that out a little bit more. So that was
when a new baby comes to the family.
It was the first child, right? It was the first child syndrome. Like the sibling comes around and you're 2 years old now, feed yourself. The fridge is over there, right?
Right.
We had, but what was interesting is I don't think that they're about to graduate in May. I don't think that class has ever totally forgiven us. Because when they came back in their second year, we got very clear feedback from the class reps that you didn't welcome us back to campus, you didn't come talk to us. I mean, they really felt hurt. So I think we kind of over-delivered on the stuff in the first year, maybe a little too much. So that might be advice.
Yeah. I'm taking plenty of notes here. Is there anybody in the audience who wants to pose a question to this group of experts in the reform process?
I have a question. Thank you so much for this panel discussion. It's nice to see you, Mary Jane and Dan, again. I think, Jackie, you mentioned this, sort of talking about the shift towards active learning and sort of a change in culture from sort of lectures where students are drinking from a fire hose and sort of more committed to this active learning. Could you share a couple, if you had some resources that you thought would be useful for us to share with faculty when we're talking about this shift towards more active learning?
Yeah, great question. So I'm sorry, I'm thinking off the top of my head. I will get you some resources, I promise. John, I don't know if you want to jump in, if you can think of them, but I'm blanking on them right now. We had some faculty workshops through our PA education association that all of our faculty have attended that talked about strategies around active learning, the different types of active learning. The big key, I think, has been just recognizing, and this has been expectations that we also let the students know, is that we aren't going to necessarily stand up here and provide this information. You're responsible for knowing it, but we're going to create the learning experience for you to bring all of that together. So, it's a lot of the preparation, the pre-work, really working through how to set that up. So by the time they come into class, they're ready to go with that active learning. But I will definitely, I have some articles that I can send your way. John, do you have any that you can?
We have a whole, we have a kind of bibliography in our brains, but we actually got the spark, I think, way back when from just reading you're reading these sort of lay books, like not getting into any of the any of the technical literature. So Make It Stick was really, that book had a really profound impact on us. And in fact, that's how we kind of got interested in Doug Larson's work at WashU. And when he came and spoke on this campus, that's when we asked if we could borrow his Learning to Learn curriculum. And so we used a lot of the stuff that is based on his work, his research. And then I can't remember the book that Jackie.
Small Teaching. Sorry, now I'm remembering. Small Teaching.
Small Teaching is a fantastic resource. It's sort of like the title is based on the idea of small ball, which is a baseball term for I think it was the Royals maybe who about, and they didn't have any big superstars. They just had these small incremental things that they did all the time, and they got to the World Series. That, if you have not seen that book, any of you, it's a fun and great book. And then Ty Lockspizer, who's not on this call right now, she recommended a book that she really likes. And I don't remember, just yesterday in our faculty meeting, I don't remember the name of it, but I wrote it down somewhere. But anyway, Ty would know, and it's also one of these sort of books that's more general, just teaching in general. But it looked wonderful also. So we used some sort of well-used generalizable kinds of resources. And then we also have some more specific papers that we have that it'd be fun to get together and share resources at some point.
That would be great. Thank you. I'm going through Make It Stick now, and I agree. It's really good.
Yeah, it's fun. It's just fun. It gets you thinking. So
I was about to check my audiobook list because every time Ty says a book, I put it down there on the list, and I'm sure I would know what that. Maybe sounds like we should have a book club of some sort.
Oh yes.
Maybe across our programs to talk about some of these things and how we are applying them and what we're learning from them along the way. Great. That's a really great idea. What other questions are out there?
The book that Ty recommended, by the way, it's called Understanding How We Learn. And there's really there's a website that this same group of authors has that's really phenomenal. And so Ty can give you more information, but
I can bring that together and send it out as well.
yeah,
There's a question from Mike Levy in here. Besides reassuring students on how that they'll be okay, how else did you all include students in the process so that they felt heard and engaged and less resentful? If you've had any experiences with that thus far. This is really timely for our session this evening with the students.
So I think I'll start by reiterating the point Dan made earlier about involving students in these monthly curriculum committee meetings and having reps from each class who are really the voice of their cohort around curriculum and what kind of feedback they want us to receive. The other thing that I think is really important is that we do read our course evaluations, and I think almost all of our faculty have used a strategy where at the beginning of the semester or sometime that's appropriate during the semester, you actually say out loud to the students, these are some of the changes that I made in this course, or this is the way, here's the assignment, and it used to be different, but I've adapted it over time based on student feedback. And you really let them know that you use student feedback and how you use it. And if you can give even 1 or 2 examples in a course, they realize that you actually do listen and use it. That also gives you a great opportunity to help them understand what types of constructive feedback they can give you both during the course and at the end. And instead of just saying, this is awful or whatever, they learn that if they can really give some direction to that, it probably will take on better meaning in the future for other students. So those are just a couple of quick examples.
And if I can just build on just one, so we do host these informal fireside chats, if you will, these town halls where all students, whoever's on campus is invited. And one of the things that was really fun to witness is when the first year student would express a concern, XYZ, and then the second or third year student would answer the question, not a faculty member. So there was actually, affirmation, verification, whatever you want to call it, from the elder classmen, if you will, and that things are okay. You're going to get, I know you feel like you're missing XYZ, but that actually pops up in year 2 in this course or whatever. And that was really a way of I thought it was great collaboration amongst the different classmates, which was really cool.
I would just add to circle back to what Jackie said earlier. I think the value of us having that learning to learn course kind of thread through the summer, which the summers are onboarding when we get all of our students when we see them for the first time. And it's a 7-week course, and learning to learn is threaded through it. And again, we have to give full credit where it's due. And Doug Larson really built this curriculum, and we tweaked it. But we do some myth busting about the how we think we learn best, but how we actually learn best. And we talk about mass learning, versus space learning. And we talk about retrieval practice and interleaving and all those things. And then we try, we don't always do it well, but we try in the curriculum as we continue through to remind learners of what we're doing. Like, look, this is like our exam process it's retrieval-based learning and space retrieval in its very essence. And we keep reminding students, like, this is not how you learned in undergrad. This is not your daddy's curriculum. This is different, but we keep coming back to our principles. Most of the things that we do, we all do the same way, and they're really based in sound principles, and they reinforce themselves. And what we found is we have second-year students who come to us and say, I finally figured it out. Like, I'm starting to study in a different way based on some of those things that we talked about way back in the first year. So I think that's been very effective to have that anchoring experience at the beginning.
Great. We're almost to the top of the hour, and I know a lot of folks have a noon appointment. I'm doing my own spaced and trying to think, what was a take-home point that I'm getting from each of these things? And I encourage all of you also to do, what's one thing that you've heard that we could adopt in our own practice, whether it's how we're going to talk to students, whether it's how we're going to talk to our faculty, whether it's what we're going to do in terms of when we feel like we're being stifled because we're doing everything the same. I'm going to remember that decreases cognitive load and that there's other ways to be innovative, for example. So everybody think about things that you could take away from the panelists' discussion about what they've learned. And I'd just like to end by giving you all an opportunity to say one or two things that you think that you think is going to really change the way we do medical education broadly, education of future healthcare providers in the future. What's coming down the pike that we need to all be ready for?
Well, I think in physical therapy, we're already looking pretty extensively on competency-based education. I know you've done that a little bit more in MD, and we're kind of a step behind, but we're really thinking that's going to be part of our next big curricular move. And some people are already digging their heels in, and others are seeking the challenge, sort of scratching at the door and wanting more. And, it's all part of the process. So I'll stop.
And others have talked about retirement before they go through this process again.
I think the other thing that's driving the future of education is going to be technology and innovating in that space, and sort of what are the tools that we have available to us in terms of content delivery, kind of getting out of that model of just being in the classroom all the time. Again, precipitated by some of this year, but I think it was coming down the pike anyway in terms of how we use technology for teaching.
Yeah, I definitely got a lot more courage after what we've been able to do. And I should just say thank you and congratulations to all of you for the work that you've done to adopt this year and to keep our students learning and growing. And I know that's been super hard, but you've been fantastic. Jackie, you were going to say something about what's coming next.
Yeah, I think, and it's been coming for a long time, but it's the freight train that keeps coming, is trying to come up with innovative ways around clinical rotations in the realm of decreasing clinical resources and increasing number of programs and students, and how we're going to shift and what we need to do to meet accreditation requirements, program needs, our learners' expectations of being out in sites and what that looks like. So we've been hearing about it for a while, and I think we're trying different things. And I think that's probably the next area we're going to need to focus on, is what does that look like in this shifting environment?
And I would challenge us all to think about how we can do this in the interprofessional models as well. because I think all of us facing these clinical challenges kind of shrink away from the solutions that might be better if we did it together. And we have all the right elements to do this in an interprofessional way, but maybe don't have the time or the bandwidth or something like that. So that might be another challenge for us to think about. Jonathan, how about you?
The only thing I was going to mention, and I totally agree with Jackie, that's our biggest challenge, and I think it's an opportunity to innovate too, but it's when we say opportunity to innovate, what we really mean is we're really feeling the stress. But the thing I would say is I think we tried to create a curriculum and we try to continue to be evidence-based. And the evidence-based in medicine and evidence-based in education are different things. And the evidence in education, it's largely fluffy. It's largely small studies. It's a lot of, I looked at a review of space learning, for example, and they did this review of all these articles, and there were 74 different definitions of like space learning. Like every group used a different set of rules. So I think one of the things that we need to do is embrace trying to be evidence-based, trying to have sort of guiding principles that you adhere to, and to not be afraid to move forward with the evidence we have. It's not great. It's a really weird, when we think about evidence-based medicine, that's not what we're talking about with education, but there still are some really good things we can sink our teeth into, and to push away from the doc and let the old habits, fade in the distance as we really try and embrace some of these new things. I think that's going to get better and better. I think more and more people are starting to assimilate what all these things are telling us about how humans learn. So I'm excited about that.
Great. I put my virtual applause up there. I want to say a real thank you to the panelists for joining us today. This is a very useful conversation, lots of food for thought. Erin has put in the Red Cap survey for those of you who are in the audience. If you please give us some feedback. I have some ideas about things we could do as an education community based on today too. So I think this was really very useful. Thanks everybody for joining us. And again, thank you for all the hard work during the COVID pandemic. And I didn't say it earlier today, but thanks again to Erin for organizing all of this week's events. You've done a fantastic job. Please join us tomorrow in additional poster sessions and on Friday for our grand rounds with Tylock Spicer. Thanks.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it so much. That was great.